I want you to picture something for a second.
Mm.
Imagine you are on a grueling, steep hike.
Okay.
You're trekking up this massive mountain, pushing through incredibly dense, high-altitude terrain.
Yeah.
Like you are sweating through your clothes.
Right, that's a real workout.
Yeah. But you aren't in the Alps, and you aren't in the Himalayas. You are in Mexico, or, maybe East Africa.
Yeah.
Or even on the island of New Guinea.
Which already feels out of place.
Totally. And you push through this final stretch of tropical or subtropical forest. You come over a rocky ridge, and suddenly you are staring at a massive ancient wall with solid ice.
It completely breaks your brain's expectations of geography, honestly.
It really does.
Because finding a towering glacier in a place we inherently associate with, intense heat and equatorial climates is just a jarring visual.
It feels like a glitch in the Matrix. But it's actually a perfect entry point for what we are exploring today in this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, we are taking a comprehensive look at the cryosphere, which, it sounds like a term from a sci-fi movie.
It really does.
But our mission today is to unpack exactly what this frozen world is, discover how it functions as the Earth's critical thermostat, and most importantly, understand why its rapid transformation affects your daily life, no matter where you live.
Right. Whether you're next to a glacier or in the middle of a desert, it matters. And the term itself gives us a pretty big clue about its scope.
Okay, let's hear it.
So it comes from the Greek words kryos, meaning cold or frost.
Right.
And sphera, meaning globe. So it's basically the umbrella term for literally everywhere on Earth's surface where water is in a solid form.
So when people hear that, they immediately picture, like, penguins, polar bears, the North Pole.
Naturally.
But as our mountain hike in Mexico proves, it is so much broader than that. We're talking sea ice, snow cover, glaciers, ice caps, ice sheets, and, frozen ground like permafrost.
Exactly. And the sheer scale of it is just difficult to wrap your head around because currently the cryosphere covers about 10% of the entire Earth's surface.
10%. Wow.
Yeah, it's a massive portion of our planet locked up in solid water. And because it's so vast, it isn't just sitting there passively. It is this integral, highly active machine that drives the global climate system.
Well, I want to dig into how it does that.
Yeah.
Because 10% of the Earth covered in ice doesn't just, look pretty. It's doing heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. To understand the mechanics of how it regulates the climate, we really have to look at the physics of snow and ice.
Okay.
There are two vital physical properties at play here. The first one is surface reflectance, which scientists call albedo.
Okay, so think about walking across black asphalt barefoot in the middle of summer.
Ouch, right?
It burns your feet because that dark surface is absorbing almost all the sun's heat. So albedo is like the opposite of that, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, albedo is the ratio of reflected solar radiation to incident solar radiation.
Put that in English for me.
Basically, when solar energy hits the Earth, non-melting, snow-covered surfaces have exceptionally high albedo. They reflect roughly 80 to 90% of incoming solar radiation right back out into space.
80 to 90%.
Yeah, only a tiny fraction of the sun's heat is actually absorbed.
That is incredibly efficient. It's like having a perfectly white, highly reflective roof on your house in the dead of summer.
Right.
It just bounces the solar energy away before it can even heat up the attic.
That's a perfect analogy, and that's just the first property.
Yeah.
The second property is thermal diffusivity.
Thermal diffusivity, okay.
Right, which is a measure of how well a substance transfers heat through itself. And it turns out snow and ice are incredibly poor at transferring heat compared to air.
Really?
Yeah, they are many orders of magnitude less efficient at it.
Wait, why is that? Because you think of ice as freezing cold, so you'd assume it makes everything around it cold, too.
You would think so, but it comes down to its physical structure. Think about a layer of snow. It isn't just solid water. It's mostly trapped air pockets, and those air pockets prevent heat energy from moving freely. So snow and ice actually act as powerful physical insulators for the ground and the ocean below them.
Oh, I see.
Like if you have a layer of sea ice, it essentially decouples the ocean from the atmosphere. It blocks the heat and moisture in the relatively warm liquid ocean from escaping into the freezing winter air above it.
Okay, so going back to the house analogy, the albedo is the perfectly white roof reflecting the summer sun.
Mm-hmm.
But the low thermal diffusivity is like taking that same house in the freezing winter and wrapping the whole thing in thick fiberglass insulation. The ice Keeps the heat trapped exactly where it needs to be.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. And when you combine the white roof and the fiberglass insulation on a planetary scale,
You get a thermostat.
exactly, you create incredibly complex climate feedback loops. The cryosphere isn't just reacting to the weather, it is literally manufacturing the weather.
Walk me through exactly how a piece of ice manufactures weather, because that sounds wild.
Okay, let's look at the Asian monsoon. When you have a particularly heavy winter snowpack across vast areas of Eurasia, it leaves behind incredibly moist, cold soils in the spring.
Okay.
Because that bright snowpack reflected so much solar energy away and insulated the cold ground below, the air sitting above Eurasia stays freezing and dense.
And cold air is heavy.
Very heavy. That dense, heavy air creates a massive, high-pressure dome, and that dome literally acts like a physical atmospheric wall.
Wow.
So months later, and thousands of miles away, when the warm, moist summer winds from the ocean try to blow northward to create the monsoon rains over India and Southeast Asia.
You hit the wall.
Exactly. They interact with those atmospheric pressure anomalies. A heavy snowfall in Siberia can physically alter wind patterns and moisture transport across an entire continent.
That is mind-blowing. White snow in Russia alters the summer rain in India just by being reflective and insulating.
It really drives home that the Earth is a single, interconnected machine.
It totally does.
Totally.
But, that Eurasian snow is seasonal. It melts. What about the ice that never leaves?
Ugh, the deep cryosphere. The timeline here is staggering because we experience snow as a seasonal event, right?
Yeah, winter comes, snow falls, spring comes, it melts.
Right. But the residence time of a water particle in a glacier or an ice sheet operates on deep geologic time. In many mountain glaciers, water might remain frozen for 10 to 100,000 years.
10 to 100,000 years.
Yeah. And that's just the mountain glaciers. If you go down to the deepest parts of the East Antarctic ice sheet, you are looking at ice that has an age approaching 1 million years.
1 million years old. That water froze into ice long before modern humans even existed.
Literally a time capsule of ancient atmospheres.
That's incredible. And in terms of sheer volume, 99% of all the Earth's glacial ice is locked up in those two vast ice sheets, right? Antarctica and Greenland.
Yes, 99%. But that remaining 1% of glacial ice is still a colossal amount of frozen water. And it's spread out across mountain ranges all over the globe.
Like we mentioned earlier, the Andes, East Africa, New Guinea.
Exactly. But the absolute powerhouse of mountain glaciers is Pakistan.
I have to say, I was completely caught off guard by the numbers on Pakistan in the sources.
Oh, the Karakoram and Himalayan ranges there are extraordinary.
Yeah, Pakistan has more glacial ice, over 7,000 known glaciers, than any other country outside the polar regions.
It's massive.
7,000. But wait, hold on. I need to stop and ask a fundamental question about glaciers themselves.
Sure.
Because you just referred to glacier ice, and scientists actually classify glacier ice as a form of solid rock.
They do, yes.
But by definition, a glacier is a body of ice that constantly moves and flows. Rock doesn't flow. So what am I missing here? If it's solid rock, how does it move?
It's a great question because it really bends the mind to picture rock flowing like a river.
Exactly.
It comes down to immense crushing pressure. The sheer mass of a glacier creates such intense internal stress driven by gravity that the crystal structure of the ice actually begins to warp. Yeah, it undergoes what's called ductile deformation. So deep within the massive body of the glacier, the ice essentially creeps forward like a super slow-moving, incredibly stiff plastic.
So the top is brittle and cracks, but the deep interior is like oozing down the mountain under its own weight.
That's the gravity-driven creep flow. But there's a second mechanism, too, called basal sliding.
Basal sliding? What's that?
Well, down at the very bottom of the glacier, where billions of tons of ice meet the bedrock, you have geothermal heat radiating up from the Earth.
Okay.
Combine that heat with the intense friction of the moving ice and the massive pressure actually lowering the melting point of the ice, and you get a thin layer of liquid meltwater at the very base.
So it basically creates its own slip inside.
Yes, exactly. The water lubricates the bedrock. So the glacier is both deforming internally like plastic and physically sliding along its wet, lubricated base.
This makes so much more sense now.
And it's incredibly fortunate for us that these glaciers exist and function this way, because together with the ice sheets, they hold roughly 69% of all the fresh water on Earth.
Everyone, just let that sink in for a second.
Right, yes.
69% of the water we rely on to survive as a species is currently solid rock. slowly oozing down mountains or locked up at the poles.
It really highlights the fragile reality of our water supply.
It does. Now, while those mountain glaciers are ancient and slow, the ice floating on our oceans is basically living on fast forward.
Oh, absolutely.
The seasonal shape-shifting of sea ice is wildly dramatic, but the sources point out that it behaves completely differently depending on which pole you are looking at.
Yeah, geography dictates everything here. Let's compare the Arctic and the Antarctic. So sea ice forms simply by the freezing of seawater.
Right.
In the southern hemisphere, down around Antarctica, the sea ice experiences colossal seasonal swings. In February, during their summer, the sea ice shrinks to a minimum of around 3 to 4 million square kilometers. But by September, in the dead of winter, it explodes outward to 17 to 20 million square kilometers.
Wait, it multiplies its size by 5 in a matter of months. It basically builds a temporary floating continent of ice around Antarctica every single winter.
It really does. But if you travel to the northern hemisphere, to the Arctic, the seasonal fluctuation is much, much smaller.
How much smaller?
Well, it only varies by a factor of 2, going from roughly 7 to 9 million square kilometers in the summer to 14 to 16 million in the winter.
Why the massive difference? Why doesn't the Arctic explode outward like Antarctica does?
Just look at a globe. Antarctica is a massive landmass entirely surrounded by a limitless open ocean. The ice can expand outward in all directions without hitting anything.
Oh, I see.
Right, but the Arctic is the exact opposite. It is an ocean entirely confined by surrounding land masses. North America, Russia, Greenland, Europe.
So the land physically acts as a wall, stopping the ice from expanding any further south during the winter.
Exactly.
That makes total sense. The ocean ice is physically trapped. But let's look at the land in the northern hemisphere during winter, specifically the snow cover.
Okay.
Because in January, northern hemisphere snow covers up to 46.5 million square kilometers. In terms of pure surface area, seasonal snow is the largest single component of the cryosphere.
And this specific component is where the abstract science directly intersects with human survival.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about the water coming out of your tap right now. If you live anywhere near a major river basin, there is a massive chance that water was locked inside a frozen mountain peak just a few months ago.
Yes.
These mountain snowpacks act like a gigantic global savings account for our water supply.
Where winter weather makes the deposits.
Exactly. Winter storms lock all that precipitation up as solid snow high in the mountains, safely stored in the cold. Then, as spring and summer roll around, the warming temperatures slowly withdraw those funds.
It's beautifully efficient.
It is. The melting snow steadily feeds the rivers, streams, and groundwater reservoirs right when the valleys below are experiencing their driest, hottest months.
It really is a perfectly calibrated natural reservoir system. It holds the water when we don't need it and releases it exactly when we do.
And the numbers on this are staggering. Over 85% of the annual runoff for the massive Colorado River Basin originates specifically as snowmelt.
85%. Wow.
Yeah. That single river feeds agriculture, powers hydroelectric dams, and provides drinking water for tens of millions of people across multiple states.
Which is wild to think about.
Without the slow release of that seasonal mountain snowpack, that entire ecosystem and economy would instantly collapse.
Which really highlights how precarious our reliance on this frozen water is. But, from the highly visible snow on the mountains, we also need to dig underground.
Yes.
To uncover the invisible pillar of the cryosphere. The frozen ground.
Permafrost,
Yeah.
the hidden gem.
Exactly. Permafrost is defined as soil, rock, or even underwater sediment that continuously remains below 0 degrees Celsius, that's 32 degrees Fahrenheit, for 2 years or more.
Now, 2 years is the technical minimum, but much of this ground has been frozen for epochs, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The oldest permafrost has been continuously frozen for around 700,000 years.
Wow.
And its footprint is enormous. It underlies roughly 15% of the entire northern hemisphere. We're talking about 18 million square kilometers stretching across vast tracts of Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and high mountain regions like the Tibetan Plateau.
It's crazy because if you look at a picture of the tundra, it just looks like barren, frozen dirt.
Right, nothing special.
But underneath the surface, it operates like a giant prehistoric chest freezer.
That's a great way to put it.
Because for millennia, plants, animals, roots, mammoths, all this organic biomass died and got buried in the soil. But because the ground was literally freezing, that organic matter never had the chance to rot or decompose.
It just went into deep freeze.
Exactly. So you have hundreds of thousands of years of carbon-rich organic material perfectly preserved in the dirt.
Which makes tundra soil one of the largest carbon sinks on the planet. But here's the mechanism that has scientists deeply concerned.
Okay.
As global temperatures rise, this prehistoric chest freezer is effectively having its power cord unplugged.
The permafrost thaws.
Yeah.
And when a freezer thaws, things start to rot.
Exactly. As the frozen soil warms up, the biological processes that were paused for millennia suddenly restart. Microbial decomposition begins.
The microbes wake up.
Yeah, billions of microscopic organisms wake up and start feasting on all that thawed, dead biomass. And as a natural byproduct of their digestion, these microbes release greenhouse gases.
Right.
Depending on how wet or dry the soil is, they exhale either carbon dioxide or methane.
And because CO2 and methane trap heat in the atmosphere, they warm the planet more, which thaws deeper layers of permafrost, which wakes up more microbes. Wait, let me jump in here.
Sure.
Because whenever permafrost emissions make the news, the headlines always frame it as this apocalyptic sudden death scenario. Like it's a ticking time bomb that's going to trigger runaway warming and boil the oceans overnight. Is that actually what the sources say is happening?
It's crucial to separate the headlines from the actual atmospheric physics here.
Okay, good.
There is widespread consensus among experts that the emissions from thawing permafrost will not be large enough or sudden enough to trigger an unstoppable runaway warming scenario.
Oh, okay.
It is not an overnight doomsday bomb. We need to be clear about that.
Okay, so we can dial back the apocalypse a little bit. But it is still a massive issue, right?
A profoundly massive issue. The current understanding is that annual permafrost emissions over the coming decades will be roughly equivalent to adding the total annual emissions of a large, highly industrialized country to the atmosphere.
Wait, really?
Yeah, we are talking about an impact comparable to the total annual greenhouse gas output of the United States or China or Russia.
So it's essentially like a brand new, super polluting nation has just materialized out of the thawing dirt.
Basically, yeah.
It won't instantly buoy the planet, but it makes the global math of trying to reduce carbon emissions significantly harder to balance.
Exactly. And that unplugged freezer is just one symptom of a much wider system-level shift. When you look across the entire cryosphere, the transformation driven by warming is incredibly rapid.
Let's connect the dots on that wider decline because the numbers in the deep dive are sobering. Start with those mountain glaciers we talked about, the ones providing the drinking water.
Right, so the retreat of mountain glaciers is perhaps the most visible indicator of a warming world. If you exclude the massive ice sheets, the total global mass lost from mountain glaciers over just a 26-year period from 1993 to 2018 was an estimated 5,500 gigatons.
5,500 billion metric tons of solid ice just melted away into the oceans in a couple decades.
Yes.
And speaking of the oceans, let's talk about the big ice sheets and sea level rise.
The Greenland ice sheet is highly vulnerable right now. If global temperatures continue to rise to the point where the entire Greenland ice sheet melts, that single body of ice holds enough water to increase global sea levels by approximately 7.4 meters.
7.4 meters, that's over 24 feet of sea level rise.
Yep.
24 feet physically reshapes the map of the world. Coastal cities, agricultural deltas, entire island nations would be permanently underwater.
And the West Antarctic ice sheet is showing similar vulnerabilities. Its eventual collapse could add several more meters to global sea levels over the coming centuries.
It's just a staggering amount of water. Finally, let's look back at the sea ice, the shapeshifter floating in the Arctic Ocean.
The Arctic is where we are seeing the most dramatic, accelerating transformation. The extent of Arctic sea ice is declining at a rate of roughly 4.7% every single decade.
Wow.
Since we first started taking satellite records, the summer ice has declined by over 50%.
And projections suggest the Arctic could see entirely ice-free summers before the year 2050, right?
Yes. Which brings us right back to where we started, albedo, the white roof.
Oh, right. Because when you lose millions of square kilometers of bright white sea ice, you expose the dark, deep blue ocean water underneath.
Exactly. It's like taking the white roof off the house and painting it black.
Man.
The dark ocean absorbs the solar heat instead of reflecting it back to space. The ocean water warms up faster, which melts even more sea ice from below, which exposes even more dark ocean water.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. This is known as the ice albedo feedback, and it is a powerful, self-reinforcing driver of regional and global warming.
We've covered a staggering amount of ground today. We've explored million-year-old ice caps, solid rock that flows like plastic prehistoric microbial freezers, and the reflective white roof keeping the planet cool.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. The cryosphere is clearly not just some distant frozen wasteland reserved for scientists and polar explorers.
Not at all. It is the operating system for the climate you live in.
Whether it is the melted mountain snow physically flowing out of your kitchen faucet, or the albedo effect determining the temperature outside your window, this frozen world dictates the parameters of human civilization.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and honestly pretty unsettling new reality to ponder as we wrap up.
Yeah, let's get into that.
So we've established that seasonal snowmelt and ancient glacial ice are absolutely crucial for our rivers, our agriculture, and our groundwater.
The global savings account.
Exactly. But the sources point out an unprecedented decline in Northern Hemisphere snow cover and mountain glaciers over the last century.
Right, they're melting faster than they're being replenished.
Yes. And because they're melting so fast, we are currently experiencing a temporary surge of water flowing down from the mountains. It feels like we have plenty of water right now.
But it's an illusion.
It is. So the provocative thought for everyone listening is this. What happens to global agriculture, to geopolitics, and to human survival when we finally hit peak water?
Peak water.
Yeah. What happens when that temporary surge ends and those ancient frozen water towers that have sustained us for millennia finally run completely dry?
That is a terrifying question. The tap just stops. Think about that next time you drop an ice cube in your glass or turn on your faucet. Until next time, keep digging deeper.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I mean, to start things off, I want you to just imagine taking apart a smartphone to see how it works.
Oh, like literally cracking off the back glass.
Exactly. You pop it open and you point to the battery, the camera sensor, the processor.
Right?
And you can confidently say, well, that is how it takes pictures, or that is how it connects to Wi-Fi. It is an incredibly complicated system, but it's physical.
Yeah, you can actually touch it.
Right. It is right there in your hands. And reverse engineering, it gives you this, this sense of mastery and certainty. But today, our mission is to turn that exact same curiosity inward.
Which is much harder to do.
Oh, completely. We are going to open up the human mind to figure out how a thought actually works and, where our sense of right and wrong genuinely comes from.
But when you look inward, you obviously don't have a screwdriver or a schematic.
No, you're essentially staring into the dark.
It is the ultimate black box.
Yeah.
And attempting to map that darkness, to actually build a schematic of human consciousness from scratch, is exactly what we're exploring today.
It's such a massive undertaking.
Yeah, it really is. And to do this, we are drawing directly from a monumentally important source. It's the 1739 magnum opus, a treatise of human nature.
Along with a lot of comprehensive biographical records of its author, David Hume.
Right. He is widely considered the intellectual giant of the Scottish Enlightenment.
Though I have to say, if you are listening to this and picturing an 18th century philosopher as some dusty, bearded man sitting in a comfortable armchair, you need to throw that image entirely out the window.
Yeah, that's not Hume at all.
Not even close. The Hume who set out to write this book was not an established tenured professor. He was a wildly ambitious 20-something.
He was just 23 years old when he started drafting this text.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. He had this burning desire to create the ultimate science of man. He literally wanted to be the Isaac Newton of human psychology.
The sheer audacity of that is just staggering.
Well, his logic was actually pretty sound. Hume looked at all the other sciences of his day, mathematics, physics, religion, politics.
Right.
And he realized they all ultimately depend on our understanding of human nature. Because, well, humans are the instruments doing the measuring, the reasoning, and the judging.
Oh, that makes total sense. If the tool is broken, the results are broken.
Exactly. If you do not understand the instrument, which is the human mind, you just can't fully trust the results of anything else it produces.
But he threw himself into this with such intensity, obsessing over these foundational questions day and night, that he actually suffered a severe physical and mental breakdown.
Yeah, it was really bad. He called it the disease of the learned.
Wait, he actually called it that?
He did. His body essentially gave out under the weight of his own relentless overthinking.
Wow.
And the really wild part is, after he finally pushed through that breakdown, finished the treatise, and actually published it, the world gave him absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I remember reading that he famously wrote that the book fell dead-born from the press.
Which is such a tragic phrase. The public and the critics of the 1700s were just, they were baffled by it.
They didn't get it at all.
No, they found it abstract, unintelligible, and many actually thought it was profoundly dangerous to traditional religious and moral structures.
But then you fast forward to today, right? And cognitive scientists, psychologists, philosophers, they all point back to this allegedly dead-born text as a foundational document of modern cognitive science.
He was literally centuries ahead of his time in how he broke down the mechanics of human thought.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To understand this science of man, we first have to figure out what Hume believed were the basic building blocks of the mind. Like, if we are going to study consciousness, what is the actual material we are sorting through?
Well, Hume was the ultimate empiricist.
Okay, meaning what, exactly?
That means he operated on the strict principle that all human knowledge comes directly from experience.
So no innate ideas.
Right, no concepts planted in our heads from birth. So he starts by dividing the entire contents of the mind into just two distinct categories: impressions and ideas.
Impressions and ideas. Got it.
And the difference between them isn't about what they are intrinsically, but entirely about their force and liveliness.
Okay, let me try to ground this for you listening right now. Imagine you are in your kitchen and you accidentally grab a cast iron pan that just came out of a 400-degree oven.
Ouch.
Yeah, exactly. The searing heat, the immediate pain, the shock, that high-definition, unavoidable sensory overload, that live event is the impression.
It is forceful and violent, as Hume describes it.
Mm.
And impressions include our sensory perceptions, but also our immediate passions and emotions as they first strike the soul.
So, like, if you feel a sudden surge of blinding anger, that's an impression too.
Yes, exactly. Now, an idea, on the other hand, is what happens when you reflect on that event later.
Like me sitting on the couch a week later, thinking back to that moment in the kitchen and remembering, wow, that really hurt.
Right, that memory is the idea. It's a blurry, faint, secondary copy of the original burn.
Because thinking about the hot pan doesn't actually make my hand blister.
Exactly. It completely lacks the violent force of the live moment. And this distinction brings us to Hume's foundational mechanism, which modern scholars call the copy principle.
The copy principle.
Yeah. Hume argues that every single simple idea in your mind is ultimately derived from and exactly represents a prior simple impression.
So I have to experience it first.
Right. You cannot have the idea of the taste of a pineapple without having actually tasted one.
Or I guess you cannot genuinely conceive of the feeling of profound grief if you've never experienced a loss that produced that impression.
You got it.
But I mean, I have to challenge that because it seems like human imagination breaks that rule constantly.
How so?
Well, I can easily imagine a completely alien landscape with like bizarre neon purple vegetation. I have obviously never experienced a primary impression of an alien planet. Doesn't my ability to conjure that image poke a massive hole in his copy principle?
It's a great question, and Hume absolutely anticipated that pushback. He answers it through the concept of complex ideas.
Okay.
While simple ideas are direct copies of simple impressions, your mind has the ability to act like a DJ, basically mixing and mashing those simple ideas together to create something new.
Oh, I see.
You have never seen an alien landscape, sure, but you have seen the color purple, you have seen vegetation, and you have seen bizarre shapes in nature.
So my imagination is just rearranging the faded copies of things I've already directly experienced.
Exactly. Every magnificent otherworldly thought you have is just a remix of basic sensory data.
Even his example in the text about the biblical New Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
With streets paved with gold and walls made of ruby.
Right. We have seen gold, we have seen rubies, we have seen walls. We just combine the copies.
But wait, in the sources, there is one specific thought experiment where Hume himself admits a flaw in this system, the missing shade of blue.
Ah, yes. This is one of the most debated paragraphs in the entire treatise.
It's fascinating.
It really is. Hume says, imagine a person who has seen every shade of blue imaginable throughout their life, except for one specific, distinct shade.
Okay, so they have a tiny gap in their visual experience.
Right. And if you place a gradient of all those blues in front of them, from darkest to lightest, leaving a blank space for that one missing shade, Hume admits that the person could likely imagine that missing color to fill the gap.
even without ever having a sensory impression of it.
Yes.
But if they can imagine a simple idea without experiencing the primary impression, doesn't that entirely destroy his copy principle? Like, the whole empiricist system rests on the idea that experience always comes first.
It is a glaring paradox, for sure. But rather than abandoning his entire architectural blueprint of the mind, Hume essentially treats it as a highly particular, singular anomaly.
So he just shrugs it off?
Kinda. For him, it is an exception that proves the rule. It is so rare and so specific that it doesn't warrant tearing down the general maxim that governs the vast, overwhelming majority of human thought.
I guess that makes sense. The copy principle still stands as the fundamental law of cognitive physics for him.
Exactly.
Well, since our complex ideas are just these separate, faint copies of impressions floating around in our heads, the next logical question is how they connect.
Right. How do we make sense of them all?
Yeah, because if my mind is just a massive filing cabinet of copied sensory data and remixed memories, it should be total chaos in there. How do these isolated ideas form a coherent, continuous worldview?
They form a worldview through what Hume calls the association of ideas.
Okay.
He realized there had to be an organizing principle. Just as Isaac Newton discovered gravity pulling physical bodies together in the universe, Hume identified a gentle mental force that pulls certain ideas together in the mind.
A sort of mental gravity.
Exactly. And he breaks this mental gravity down into 3 specific rules of association: resemblance, contiguity, and cause and effect.
Okay, resemblance is pretty straightforward, I think. Like,
Yeah.
if I look at a portrait of a dog, my mind naturally pulls up the idea of my actual dog. They resemble each other.
Spot on. And contiguity is about closeness in space and time.
So if I think about my childhood bedroom, my mind doesn't just jump to a random desert. It naturally drifts to the hallway outside that bedroom or the kitchen downstairs because they are spatially contiguous.
Exactly. And then the third rule, cause and effect, is the strongest bond of all.
How does that one work?
Well, if you see a fresh wound, your mind immediately associates it with the pain that caused it or the weapon that inflicted it. These 3 mechanisms are basically the glue of the mind.
The glue that holds the chaos together.
Yes. They are the only reasons our thoughts flow in a logical narrative stream, rather than just firing haphazardly like static on a television screen. This constant, gentle pull of association forms our mental habits over time.
So it's almost like a flip book. Like, if I take a pad of paper with slightly different drawings on each page and flip them fast enough, the association of those images creates the illusion of a cartoon character running across the page.
That's a great way to picture it.
It feels like one continuous, unified identity. But if I stop and look closely at any given moment, there is no moving character. There are only static, isolated drawings.
That is a perfect transition into one of Hume's most radical, earth-shattering conclusions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he applied that exact flipbook logic to the concept of the self.
The self, like who we are.
Exactly. For millennia, philosophers and religious thinkers posited that humans have a fixed, eternal, unchangeable core identity, a soul or a continuous I.
Right.
But Hume looked inward to find this core self, and he found absolutely nothing of the sort.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I want you, listening right now, to try this. Try to catch a thought of yourself without attaching it to a specific feeling, a memory, or a physical sensation in your body. Try to isolate just the pure you.
It is surprisingly impossible.
It really is. You just end up thinking about the rhythm of your breathing or an itch on your arm or maybe what you're planning to eat for lunch.
Hume found the exact same thing. Whenever he tried to catch a glimpse of himself, he always stumbled upon some particular perception, a feeling of heat or cold, love or anger, pain or pleasure.
Never just himself.
Never. He could never catch himself without a perception, and he could never observe anything but the perception. Therefore, he concluded, there is no continuous self.
Mind-blowing.
We are nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity and are in a perpetual flux and movement.
So our identity is just a mental illusion created by the speed and association of our perceptions, like the flip book.
Precisely.
But wait, if Hume is right that our internal reality is just a flip book of finite perceptions, that completely shatters our understanding of the physical universe as well.
Oh, absolutely it does.
Because 18th century mathematics and physics were built on entirely different assumptions.
They were heavily influenced by thinkers like René Descartes and Isaac Newton, who dealt in absolutes. Mathematicians of the time loved the idea of infinite divisibility.
That's the concept that you could take a line in space or a moment in time and just divide it in half, infinitely.
Right. And Newton viewed space and time as these absolute eternal containers that exist independently of the objects within them, like a ticking clock in the background of the universe.
But Hume basically takes a sledgehammer to that entire framework.
He really does. He argues that because human knowledge is strictly bound by our impressions and ideas, our capacity to conceive things is inherently finite. You simply cannot have an impression of infinity.
Because we can't experience infinity.
Exactly. He uses this brilliant ink spot analogy in the text to prove it.
Oh, yeah. Put a tiny spot of ink on a piece of paper. Now take a step back, then another step back. Eventually, that spot just vanishes from your sight.
Right. And right before it vanishes, in that final moment where you can just barely perceive it, the image in your mind is at its absolute minimum.
You cannot mentally divide that spot anymore without it disappearing into nothingness.
Exactly. That is an indivisible idea. The physical world, as we can comprehend it, is made up of these finite, indivisible mental units.
And he applies that same strict empiricism to time, doesn't he?
He does. Time is not an invisible, eternal container. Time is nothing more than the perceivable succession of changeable objects.
Like notes in a song.
Yes. His example is, if you listen to 5 distinct notes played consecutively on a flute, you get the idea of time.
But time isn't a magical 6th note playing in the background.
Exactly. It is literally just the order in which the 5 notes were played. Without changing perceptions, time simply does not exist for us.
That is just so wild to think about, but it makes me wonder if space and time are fundamentally tied to our finite perceptions, and my internal self is just a passive bundle of perceptions reacting to causes and effects. Do I even have free will?
That is the big question.
Because if cause and effect is the strongest mental glue, as you mentioned earlier, aren't my choices just the unavoidable effects of previous causes? Am I just a spectator watching my own flipbook?
This is where Hume dives into the mechanics of determinism. He was actually a compatibilist.
Meaning he believed determinism and free will can coexist?
Yes, but only if we rigorously define how human action works. He argues that human actions are constantly united with our motives, our tempers, and our circumstances.
So we act based on our inner state.
Right. Just as physical nature follows strict laws, like water invariably freezing when the temperature drops below a certain point, human nature follows highly predictable patterns based on cause and effect.
The sources highlight a really pointed example he uses for this. He says that expecting a wildly chaotic, unstable person to suddenly act with perfect prudence and foresight is just as absurd as expecting a 4-year-old infant to lift a 300-pound weight.
It's a great comparison.
The physical impossibility of the child is the exact same as the psychological impossibility of the chaotic person. Their internal variables, their motives and temperaments mechanically dictate their actions.
Exactly.
But if my behavior is as predictable as a chemical reaction based on my internal variables, how can we possibly call that freedom?
Well, we have to redefine what freedom actually means in practice. For Hume, freedom does not mean your choices have no prior causes.
Because that would just be random.
Right. A choice with no prior cause wouldn't be freedom. It would be chaotic chance. Freedom simply means acting according to your own inner determinations without external physical chains holding you back.
Okay, so if I want to leave the room and the door isn't locked, I am free to leave.
Yes. The fact that your desire to leave the room was caused by your personality, your past experiences, or your biological needs does not negate your freedom. You are still the one acting on the desire.
So freedom is the ability to act on my desires, even if those desires were pre-programmed by my environment and my history.
That's a perfect summary.
But if human reason is this limited deterministic sorting machine, just processing faded copies of past impressions and observing predictable causes and effects, how do we ever decide what is right or wrong?
Morality is a whole different beast for Hume.
Right, because if everything is just a mechanical chain of events, where does morality come from?
This brings us to what is easily Hume's most explosive, foundational quote regarding human behavior. He wrote, "Reason is, and ought only to be the slave of the passions."
The slave of the passions. That is a total paradigm shift.
It really is. Up until Hume, the dominant philosophical tradition, the rationalists, believed that morality was something you could deduce through cold, hard logic, almost like solving a geometric proof.
They thought if you just reasoned flawlessly, you would uncover universal, objective, moral truths woven into the fabric of the universe.
And Hume completely dismantles that. He says reason is inert. It is a calculator. It can tell you what is, but it can never, ever tell you what ought to be.
This is known as the famous is-ought problem, right?
Yes, reason can analyze facts and trace the relationship between objects. For instance, reason can tell you that a certain chemical compound is toxic to human biology. That is a fact. That is what is.
And reason can also predict that if you drink it, your organs will shut down.
Exactly. But reason alone, working purely on logic, cannot make the leap too, therefore you ought not drink it.
Hold on. If reason is just a slave to the passions, that actually terrifies me.
How so?
You are saying that if someone's passion or their inner desire is to hurt other people, there is no mathematical objective rule in the universe that proves them wrong.
Logically speaking, no.
If morality is just based on feelings and subjective passions rather than universal logic, what stops a psychopath? Are we just relying on the hope that people feel like being good?
It is a deeply unsettling prospect, and his critics relentlessly attacked him for it, accusing him of tearing down the foundations of ethics.
I mean, I can see why.
But Hume was not a nihilist, and he didn't believe morality was just subjective random chaos. To save the system from collapsing into anarchy, he introduces a vital biological mechanism: sympathy.
Sympathy, like feeling sorry for someone.
More like empathy in modern psychological terms.
Okay. So he argues that we are biologically wired to feel what others feel.
Yes, it is an automatic mechanism of the human machine. We naturally feel a spark of pleasure when we see others happy, and we instinctively wince in pain when we see others suffer.
It's a shared universal human sentiment.
Exactly. When we label an action as virtuous,
Yeah.
it is not because we mathematically deduced its goodness. It is because observing that action produces a feeling of agreeable sympathy within our shared human nature.
So our collective emotional compass, our shared capacity to feel pleasure and pain, is the ultimate grounding basis for all our moral judgments.
You've got it. Reason just helps us figure out how to achieve the outcomes our passions desire.
Okay, that makes perfect sense for my immediate circle. Empathy easily explains why I care for my family, my friends, the people right in front of me whose emotions I can directly perceive.
Right?
But natural sympathy has an incredibly limited radius. We do not naturally feel deep, burning, self-sacrificing empathy for a stranger on the other side of the planet, or even a total stranger in our own city, the same way we do for our own child.
That's very true.
If our natural love runs out so quickly, how did we ever build large, functional, global societies?
This is where Hume transitions from psychology into brilliant sociological insight. He recognized that limited radius. He argues that because resources in the world are scarce, and human empathy is naturally confined to our immediate kin, a society built purely on raw instinct would inevitably collapse.
Because it would just be a permanent, violent war over those scarce resources.
Exactly. Everyone would lose in a pure state of nature. So Hume introduces the concept of justice as an artificial virtue.
By artificial, he means it does not exist in nature. There is no biological instinct for property rights or contract law.
Precisely. Justice is not the opposite of human selfishness. It is human selfishness playing the ultimate long game.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Early humans realized that constant conflict was destroying their mutual passions for safety and comfort. So we invented a tool. We invented property, laws, and the framework of justice.
It is essentially our self-love taking what Hume calls a new and more convenient direction.
Yes, we willingly restrict our own short-term impulses to steal or cheat because our reason calculates that protecting the artificial system of justice is the only reliable way to protect ourselves and our property in the long run.
It is the paradox of a selfish creature inventing a selfless system for its own benefit.
That's exactly what it is.
Think about this. The next time you are standing patiently in a massive line at a coffee shop, you are not waiting your turn out of a deep, overwhelming natural love for the 10 strangers standing in front of you.
Definitely not. You just want your coffee immediately.
Right. But you are actively participating in an artificial invention. The rules of order and fairness. You restrict your short-term impulse to cut to the front because you implicitly know that the social contract is literally the only way anyone gets their coffee without the situation devolving into a fistfight.
And the genius of human nature is that because this artificial invention of justice is so overwhelmingly vital for our survival and comfort over generations, our natural sympathy actually attaches itself to the rules themselves.
Oh, I see.
We start to feel genuine moral outrage when someone cuts that coffee shop line, not just because it delays our coffee, but because their action threatens the very artificial system that keeps society functioning.
Our passions adopt the artificial virtue as if it were natural.
Exactly.
It is just incredible to step back and look at the architecture of what he built. To think this entire framework came from a 23-year-old battling a nervous breakdown in the 1700s.
It's hard to believe.
Hume started by just trying to catalog the simplest impressions of the mind, the feeling of a hot pan, the memory of a color, and he ended up building a comprehensive mechanical explanation for our entire social reality.
And his intellectual journey didn't stop with the treatise. He went on to write a massive 6-volume history of England that became a huge bestseller.
Finally bringing him the wealth and literary fame he craved during his lifetime.
He achieved his worldly success, but it is that supposedly dead-born treatise that ultimately altered the course of human thought.
Yeah, decades after its quiet publication, the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant read Hume's work and famously declared that Hume had awakened him from his dogmatic slumber.
Hume forced the entire discipline of philosophy to wake up, to stop relying on unproven, abstract assumptions about the soul and the universe, and to look rigorously at the messy, empirical reality of human nature.
His fingerprints are all over modern cognitive science, psychology, and behavioral economics today. But as we wrap up this deep dive into his blueprint of the mind, there is one final provocative thought from the source material that I want to leave you with, something to mull over on your own.
It concerns the ultimate implication of Hume's view on reason and the passions, especially as we look to the future.
Today, we are absolutely obsessed with solving human problems using cold, hard data, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. We are spending billions of dollars trying to build machines that operate on pure, flawless reason.
But if David Hume is right, if reason is and always will be merely a slave to the passions, incapable of generating moral direction on its own, can a completely rational AI ever truly make a moral decision?
Right. If morality fundamentally requires the biological capacity to feel pleasure and pain, to experience genuine sympathy and shared sentiment, what happens then?
It's a profound question.
Exactly. If we finally succeed in perfectly reverse engineering intelligence and we build that flawless, perfectly rational machine, will we find that true morality always requires the messy, subjective, feeling human heart? Can logic ever replace empathy? Something to think about the next time you read about an algorithmic decision or simply look in the mirror.
Imagine guarding the biggest, most dangerous secret in global financial history.
Right, a secret that could literally topple world leaders.
Exactly. Expose international cartels, rewrite the global economy. Now imagine guarding that massive secret with, like, a bottle of glitter nail polish.
It sounds totally absurd when you say it out loud.
It really does. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are bringing you directly into the center of the largest data leak in journalism history.
We're talking about the Panama Papers.
Yeah, the Panama Papers. Based on this really extensive stack of Wikipedia sources, our mission today is to decode the unprecedented mechanics of how this massive breach actually happened.
Because it's a story that fundamentally reshapes how you understand the world around you.
For sure. We are going to separate the perfectly legal tax loopholes from the outright criminal enterprises. And most importantly, we're going to uncover exactly how the hidden wealth of the global elite is affecting your everyday life. Yes, you.
Because, this isn't just about billionaires on yachts. This hits much, much closer to home.
It really does. We're looking at a parallel financial universe that operates right under our noses, but by a completely different set of rules.
Yeah, a totally different rule book.
Okay, let's unpack this. The sheer mind-boggling scale of this leak, we are talking about 11.5 million documents.
Which is just a staggering number to even try to comprehend.
I know, right? Yeah. These files detailed over 214,000 offshore entities, and they were all managed by one single Panamanian law firm.
Mossack Fonseca.
Right, Mossack Fonseca. Now, 2.6 terabytes of text in PDFs is, it's hard to visualize. So if we look back at the WikiLeaks Cablegate leak in 2010.
Which absolutely shook the world at the time.
Totally shook the world. That leak was 1.7 gigabytes. So if the WikiLeaks data was like a wheelbarrow full of paper, the Panama Papers is a fleet of cargo ships packed to the brim.
Wow.
Yeah, it's over 1,500 times larger.
And, that unprecedented volume is exactly why this story is so unique. When people hear about a data breach of that magnitude, the natural assumption is, well, it must be some cinematic, highly sophisticated cyber heist.
Right, like pulled off by a government intelligence agency or something.
Exactly. But the sources reveal a much more mundane reality. Mossack Fonseca wasn't taken down by a super spy. They were taken down by shockingly terrible data security.
Which is wild. I mean, I would assume a law firm handling trillions of dollars for the world's most powerful people would have, I don't know, military-grade encryption.
You would think so. But the cybersecurity experts who reviewed the fallout noted that the firm wasn't even encrypting its emails.
Wait, not even their email?
Not even the emails. And it gets worse. Their client portal was running on a 3-year-old version of a content management system called Drupal.
Oh, man. 3 years old in tech time is basically ancient history.
It really is. It had numerous well-documented vulnerabilities that literally any amateur hacker could look up online.
So they were basically leaving the front door wide open.
Yeah, and the back door, too. Furthermore, a gray hat hacker pointed out that their database hadn't even been secured against SQL injection.
Okay, I've heard that term, but I'm not a coder. How does a database just, hand over its contents to an outsider?
Think of an SQL injection like filling out a bank deposit slip. Normally, you write your account name in the box, the bank teller reads it, and, deposits the money.
Right, simple enough.
But imagine if, instead of writing your name, you wrote a command that said, print out everyone else's account balances.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the database software isn't properly trained to separate a mere name from a system command, it just blindly obeys the instruction written in the box.
So they basically left the system in a state where anyone could just ask it to print the entire client list. And the server would just say, sure, here you go.
Precisely. It's a very basic, well-known attack vector. And on top of that, their email and web servers weren't physically or digitally separated from the core client database.
Meaning, once you're in, you're everywhere.
Exactly. Once someone slipped through that Drupal vulnerability, they had the keys to the entire kingdom.
But having an unencrypted database is only half the battle, right? Like someone still has to actually walk in, digitally speaking, and take the files.
Right, you need a whistleblower.
Which brings us to the whistleblower, a still anonymous individual known only as John Doe, who reached out to a journalist at the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung.
And the risk this person was taking cannot be overstated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doe told the journalist outright, "My life is in danger." They communicated exclusively over encrypted channels and agreed never to meet face-to-face.
Which, given the client list, which included cartels and sanctioned oligarchs, that paranoia was completely justified.
100%. The journalists at Süddeutsche Zeitung were so terrified of the data being compromised or their source being exposed that they went to incredible extremes.
They had to. The stakes were life and death.
So they stored the data in a restricted room on air-gapped computers, meaning these machines were completely physically disconnected from the internet.
Right, you couldn't hack them remotely because there was literally no connection to hack.
Exactly. But my absolute favorite detail from the source material is the glitter nail polish.
The physical tamper seal.
Yes. To make sure no one had secretly sneaked into the room and opened the computers to, tamper with the hard drives, the journalists painted the screws of the computer cases with glitter nail polish.
It's a brilliant, low-tech security measure. The glitter flakes settle in a completely unique, randomized pattern.
Right, so you can't just replicate it.
Exactly. If anyone unscrewed the casing, that microscopic pattern of the glitter would break, and the journalists would instantly know they'd been compromised.
Glitter nail polish guarding the secrets of the global elite. It's just so poetic.
Yeah.
But eventually, Süddeutsche Zeitung realized they had a massive logistical problem.
Well, yeah, you can't just hit crawl plus F on 11.5 million random JPEGs, PDFs, and handwritten notes.
Right, you'd be searching for decades.
What's fascinating here is how this massive data dump forced the global professionalization of lectivism. The days of simply dumping raw files on the internet were over.
They needed backup.
Big time. Süddeutsche Zeitung brought in the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ. They quietly coordinated reporters from 107 media organizations across 80 countries.
That level of coordination is insane.
It really is. For over a year, these journalists collaborated in total secrecy.
But how did they physically make the data readable? I'm just imagining a warehouse of reporters reading PDFs for a year straight.
They actually had to build what was essentially a highly secure private version of Google just for these leaked files.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they used open source software like Apache Solr and proprietary digital forensic software called NUF. But first, they had to run optical character recognition, or OCR, on millions of scanned documents.
OCR, that's where it reads the image, right?
Exactly. OCR essentially teaches a computer to look at an image of a handwritten note or a scanned passport, identify the shapes of the letters, and convert them into actual searchable text. Only after indexing all of that could they start connecting the dots, like matching a politician's name in Argentina to a bank account in Switzerland.
So they finally build this searchable map of the shadow economy. Now we have to look at what the files actually contained.
The fun part.
Right. And I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. It is really easy to hear the phrase offshore shell company and immediately picture an evil criminal mastermind stroking a white cat.
A classic James Bond villain.
Exactly. But utilizing offshore accounts doesn't automatically mean you're breaking the law, does it?
No, it doesn't. And that's a crucial distinction the sources make. There are legitimate, entirely legal reasons for an individual or a multinational corporation to utilize offshore entities.
The example from the sources that really surprised me was the estate of the legendary American filmmaker Stanley Kubrick.
Right, the director of The Shining in 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Yes. So Kubrick bought this magnificent 18th century English manor back in 1978. He lived there, he filmed Eyes Wide Shut and Full Metal Jacket there.
A very iconic property.
Totally. So when he died in 1999, his personal worth was around $20 million, mostly tied up in this property. Now, the Panama Papers revealed that 3 holding companies set up by Mossack Fonseca actually own that property.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, and those companies are in turn held by trusts for his children and grandchildren.
Which, to the untrained eye, sounds incredibly suspicious.
Right, like he's hiding something.
Yeah.
But the sources detail how this is completely legal estate planning. Because Kubrick was an American citizen living in Britain, his estate was caught in a jurisdictional nightmare.
The tax laws must have been overlapping.
Exactly. If he hadn't used this offshore trust structure, his estate would have been hit with massive transfer taxes from both the U.S. and U.K. governments simultaneously.
That would be devastating.
The tax bill would have been so astronomically high that his family likely would have been forced to sell their home, the place where he's literally buried on the grounds, by the way, just to get the liquid cash to pay the governments.
So it was really a protective measure. And the sources point out other legal uses, too. For instance, some businesses use offshore structures simply to hold funds in U.S. dollars if their local currency is volatile.
Makes sense, just trying to keep the money stable.
Right, or to navigate complex legal jurisdictions, like avoiding certain Islamic inheritance laws upon a founder's death, which might otherwise force the breakup of a family business.
Ah, I see.
It is a financial tool, and tools can be used illegally.
But, and this is the pivot point of the whole leak, if it's just a neutral tool, why the extreme secrecy?
Well, because while the tool itself isn't inherently illegal, Mossack Fonseca's own internal communications paint a very, very different picture of their day-to-day operations.
They kind of told on themselves, didn't they?
They really did. A leaked internal memorandum from the firm flatly admitted, and this is a quote, 95% of our work coincidentally consists in selling vehicles to avoid taxes.
95%. That is, that completely shatters the illusion that this is mostly just benign estate planning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, anonymity breeds criminality. When you design a global system that offers an impenetrable wall of secrecy, the people who need secrecy the most, criminals, fraudsters, corrupt politicians, will inevitably exploit it.
And the case studies in these papers prove exactly that. Let's look at the 1983 Brinksmat gold robbery in the UK.
A legendary heist.
Over 10 million pounds of cash from the sale of the stolen gold was laundered through a Panamanian front company called Fiberian Inc.
And Mossack Fonseca was right in the middle of it.
Yeah, they helped set this up, initially unwittingly, but the sources indicate they later acted with full complicity.
The mechanism they used there is key, though. They issued what are called bearer shares.
I always hear that term in spy movies, but how do they actually work?
Well, unlike normal company stock, where your name is registered in a central database as the owner, a bearer share is completely unregistered.
So there's no list of who owns what?
Exactly. It functions like a $20 bill. Whoever physically holds the piece of paper in their hand is the legal owner of the company.
Wow. It leaves absolutely no paper trail.
None at all. You can hand a briefcase of bearer shares to an associate in an airport lounge, and you've just transferred ownership of a multi-million-dollar shell company completely invisibly.
That is wild.
So that stolen gold money was recycled right back into the UK through land and property transactions totally undetected.
But it escalates far beyond bank robbers. The leaked documents revealed how offshore companies were used to systematically evade international sanctions.
Right. Which brings us to DCB Finance.
The case of DCB Finance is a perfect example.
It was a Virgin Islands-based shell company founded by a North Korean banker named Kim Chulsum and a British banker named Nigel Cowie.
Wait. How does a North Korean banker just casually open an offshore company when his country is under heavy UN sanctions? Don't banks check who they are doing business with?
They're supposed to, through Know Your Customer laws. But this is where the offshore shell game works its magic. DCB Finance was used as a front.
Right, to mask who was really behind it.
By incorporating in the British Virgin Islands through Mossack Fonseca, they created a legal mask. When DCB Finance interacted with the global banking system, the bank saw a British Virgin Islands corporate entity, not a sanctioned North Korean official.
Unbelievable.
The U.S. Treasury Department eventually discovered that DCB Finance was providing banking services to a North Korean arms dealer. They were helping to sell weapons and expand North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
All facilitated through the anonymity provided by a Panamanian law firm.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from a filmmaker's country estate to stolen gold to North Korean nuclear proliferation. It feels very disconnected from normal life.
It feels like a movie plot.
It really does. But the mission of this deep dive is to bring this home to you, the listener. Why should you, going about your daily life, care about a shell company registered in the British Virgin Islands?
Because the shadow economy directly impacts the real economy. It impacts the streets you walk on and the homes you try to buy. When international syndicates, corrupt officials, and ultra-wealthy individuals need to park billions of dollars of dirty or hidden money, they don't just stuff it in a giant mattress. They want clean, appreciating assets. So they buy luxury real estate.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. Let's say I'm a corrupt official and I want to buy a house in Miami with illicit funds. How does a Panamanian law firm help me do that without the FBI knocking on my door?
It's a process of layering. First, your illicit money is wired into an offshore trust in a tax haven, where banking secrecy laws prevent anyone from seeing you own it.
Okay, step one is the offshore trust.
Right. That trust then forms a limited liability company, an LLC, in Florida. That Florida LLC then purchases the Miami condo in straight cash.
Because there's no mortgage. There's no bank involved to run heavy compliance checks.
Exactly. The local real estate agent just sees an LLC making a cash offer. The true beneficial owner you remains completely hidden.
The dirty money has successfully been transformed into a clean, physical asset.
Yes. And when billions of dollars of this phantom money flood into a local housing market, it artificially drives up the cost of living for everyone else.
The statistics from the sources are just staggering. Look at London. Between 2007 and 2016, housing prices in London shot up by 50%.
That's a massive jump.
Right. The former head of Britain's National Crime Agency explicitly stated that the London property market had been skewed by laundered money from overseas criminals.
And the ripple effects of that are devastating for everyday people. 3/4 of Londoners under the age of 35 cannot afford to buy a home.
3/4.
Partly because they are unwittingly bidding against anonymous shell companies with bottomless pockets of illicit cash.
And it's not just London. The sources note that an incredible 76% of condo owners in Miami were paying in cash.
76%.
In 2015, cash sales accounted for 90% of new home sales there.
Or look at Vancouver, British Columbia. A study of real estate sales found that 18% of transactions in Vancouver's most expensive neighborhoods were cash purchases.
And those were heavily influenced by foreign nationals parking wealth offshore, right?
Exactly. We are talking about everyday people being priced out of their own cities because those cities are literally being used as offshore safety deposit boxes.
And it goes beyond housing, too.
Yeah.
When the ultra-wealthy and massive corporations use these 95% tax avoidance vehicles, who makes up the difference?
We all do.
Oxfam released a report on income inequality that pointed directly at tax havens.
Oxfam concluded that tax havens are at the core of a global system that deprives governments of the resources they need to provide vital public services.
Right, because the money just isn't there.
When multinational companies and billionaires shift their profits offshore, that is billions of dollars missing from public budgets. The International Monetary Fund estimated that profit shifting by multinational companies costs developing countries around $213 billion every single year.
$213 billion. That is almost 2% of their national income completely gone.
When the top tier opts out of the tax system, The burden inevitably falls on the middle and lower classes, directly fueling the gap between the rich and the poor.
So the ICIJ journalists dropped this massive 2.6 terabyte bomb on the world in April 2016.
The fallout was instant.
The political earthquakes were immediate. The papers named 12 extant or former world leaders, 128 other public officials, and hundreds of celebrities.
The most immediate political casualty was the Prime Minister of Iceland, Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson.
Oh, this story's crazy.
The papers revealed that he and his wife possessed a secret offshore account in a shell company called Wintris Inc.
The conflict of interest there is what really gets me. He had campaigned on a promise to be tough on Iceland's foreign bank creditors following the financial crisis.
Right, he was the tough-on-banks guy.
But it turned out his own secret offshore company, Wintris, was actually one of those creditors. The public outrage was so intense, there were massive protests in the streets, that he was forced to resign just days after the leak.
He certainly wasn't the only leader named, though. The sources note the leaked files tied the names of other prominent political figures to offshore entities.
Like who?
Including Argentina's then-president Mauricio Macri and Ukraine's then-president Petro Poroshenko.
And just to be clear for you listening, we are looking strictly at what the sources report here. We're just conveying the information in the leak.
Right. We're not taking sides, just stating who was in the documents.
But the sheer fact that these names appeared in the documents sent shockwaves through their respective governments.
It did. And beyond the political fallout, there were tangible financial recoveries. By April 2019, it was reported that governments around the world had recovered over $1.2 billion in back taxes and fines as a direct result of the Panama Papers investigations.
That's a huge victory.
Great Britain recovered $253 million, Denmark $237 million, Germany $183 million. It was a massive, unprecedented clawback of hidden wealth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What actually happened to the architects of all this?
You mean Mossack and Fonseca?
Yeah. With all this evidence, the Brinks-Matt Gold, the North Korean arms dealers, the 11.5 million documents, Jürgen Mossack and Ramon Fonseca must be rotting in a Panamanian prison right now, right?
Well, the immediate fallout for the firm was catastrophic. In March 2018, they announced they were shutting down entirely, citing the irreversible damage to their reputation.
Yeah, it's hard to run a secrecy firm when all your secrets are on the internet.
Very true. Their story became so infamous that Netflix even made a movie about them called The Laundromat. And yes, in 2020, German authorities issued international arrest warrants for the founders on charges of forming a criminal organization. Panama eventually arrested them on money laundering charges.
Okay, so justice is served.
Not quite. This raises an important question about the massive gap between public exposure via journalism and actual legal conviction in a court of law.
What do you mean?
Just recently, in June 2024, a judge in Panama acquitted all 28 accused individuals, including the founders of Mossack Fonseca.
Wait, I'm stuck on that. Acquitted, after everything we just went through. How is that legally possible?
The judge ruled that the evidence brought against them was simply insufficient. But crucially, the judge stated that the chain of custody for the digital evidence was incomprehensible and flawed.
Because the data was stolen by an anonymous hacker, passed through encrypted channels to journalists, and processed by proprietary search engines, it didn't follow the legal rules of evidence gathering.
Exactly. The digital paper trail was so vast and obtained so far outside traditional legal and law enforcement channels that translating journalistic proof into legal proof proved impossible in that courtroom.
That is just, wow.
The very scale and complexity of the digital leak that brought them down in the court of public opinion essentially made it impossible to convict them in a court of law.
That is a staggering paradox. We've gone from a cryptic message from a whistleblower protected by a $5 bottle of glitter nail polish to the exposure of a multi-trillion-dollar parallel economy.
It's an incredible journey.
We've seen how a legal loophole to save a filmmaker's estate relies on the exact same mechanical obfuscation that allows international syndicates to launder stolen gold and fund nuclear weapons.
And we've seen how deeply interconnected our world really is. That invisible ledger we talked about at the beginning, it isn't floating in space.
No, it's very grounded.
It is anchored to the real estate in your city, the taxes that fund your local schools, and the fundamental inequality of the global economy.
It is a lot to process. But there's one final haunting detail from the source material that we have to leave you with today. The person who started all of this, John Doe.
Yes, To this day, the identity of the whistleblower remains entirely unknown, even to the journalists at Süddeutsche Zeitung who broke the story.
John Doe said from the very beginning, "My life is in danger." And in a later statement, Doe pointed to the subsequent murders of 2 investigative journalists who worked tirelessly on exposing offshore corruption based on these types of leaks. It's a very dark reality. Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was assassinated by a car bomb in Malta in 2017, and Jan Kuciak, who was murdered in his home in Slovakia in 2018. Doe pointed to their tragic deaths as absolute proof of the lethal danger of stepping into this shadow world.
Which leaves us with a heavy, vital question to ponder. In an era where digital data is supposed to be permanent and everything leaves a trace, how long can the ultimate secret keeper stay hidden?
That's the million-dollar question.
What price are investigative journalists still paying around the world to bring the next massive leak out of the black hole and into the light?
It really makes you wonder. With traditional offshore law firms like Mossack Fonseca now under a massive global microscope, where are today's illicit billions flowing? Are they washing through cryptocurrency? Are they parked in the unregulated high-end art market? The ledger is still invisible. It's just changed shape. Until next time, keep looking past the ledger.